All right, so hello and welcome to this episode. My name is Braden, and I'm a fourth year student at Capilano University, where I'm currently finishing my bachelor's in business and taking a course in business ethics. As part of this course, we're exploring how leadership research can inform ethical decision making in organizations, including how leaders shape ethical behavior, organizational culture, and responsibility. So today I'm excited to be joined by Dr. Jon Evans, and I've been learning from his research on moral identity and leader signaling, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your insights on that. And Dr. Evans, thank you so much for being here and taking the time today.
Yeah, glad to be here. It's good. Looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome, yeah. So I'd love to start with your journey. So I heard, yeah, so you went from being a military officer and a project manager to obviously now your work at UBC. So how did those early roles lead you into studying ethics?
It's been a long process, honestly, to be where I'm at with my career. My undergraduate degree is in mechanical engineering, and that really stemmed from my continued irrational passion of mountain biking.
Yes.
And that's why I went to study engineering. And then during my undergrad days, I realized that I really enjoyed leadership challenges. And so the US Navy presented an opportunity where I could do engineering leadership right out of college. So I joined the Navy Civil Engineer Corps, and my job with the Navy was to manage construction projects. I did that in San Diego, California. There's a submarine base there. And then I did that in Okinawa, Japan. There's several Marine Corps bases as well as a Navy airfield there, and so I did that work there.
Wow.
I left the military to seek new challenges, and I ended up joining ExxonMobil, doing very similar work, doing construction management. But this time, at first, I was doing projects that were like offshore construction,
Right.
laying pipe, or constructing either modifications to or constructing offshore refining or drilling facilities. And I did that in Nigeria, and then there was a big project in Russia. And
Wow.
then while I was living in Houston and doing that work, I got an MBA at the University of Texas at Austin.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then the last job I had with Exxon, my family and I, we moved to Qatar in the Middle East, and we're building a large natural gas plant on the northern end of the country. That was a big $4 billion project I was working on.
Wow.
And once again, I found myself wanting a new challenge, something different. And so I left Exxon and went to study at the University of Arizona. I studied organizational behavior with an emphasis on leadership. And when I graduated with a PhD in those areas, UBC was kind enough to offer me a position here. And here at Sauder, I teach leadership development. I teach it to MBA students and Masters of Management students. I don't really teach undergrads. I teach some PhD students as well.
Mhm.
And I'm also the director of the Montalbano Centre for Responsible Leadership Development. So I do a lot of work promoting science-based leadership practices, or you could say promoting evidence-based leadership practices. And so that's what we do with the center, and that's a lot of what I do in my teaching. And then my research focuses mostly on the different things that leaders can signal, and then how those signals influence the degree to which they're seen as being a leader, and how those signals influence the behavior of the people they're trying to lead. So that's a short overview of my background that brought me to the
Yeah.
place where I'm at now.
Yeah. That is quite the incredible journey for sure. Yeah. And yeah, like you mentioned before, you're a huge mountain biker too, and that's that's so cool. I love to ride as well, but yeah, I
Oh,
saw you did that big 100-mile race a couple years ago back in
that
Oregon.
was that
That's
was last summer. Yeah, last summer I did a Dirty Century, right? So it
yeah.
was a 100-mile mountain bike race in Bend, Oregon. That was actually last summer was 10 years after the first time I did it. So it was
Oh
fun to
wow.
see where I was at 10 years later.
Yeah. How
I'm
did you
happy to
do?
say I shaved an hour and 40 minutes off my time. So
Very
I'm
good.
happy that I'm
Yeah.
stronger in my older years.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. I used to do a bunch of cross country riding and I've kind of lost the habit, but I'm getting back into it again.
Yeah, this isn't a real place for cross country riding. Like my big training ride was I started at UBC and
Yeah.
I cycled over and did the dirty triple crown. So I did Cyprus and then from
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then oh sorry, Seymour, Cyprus. I'm sorry, Seymour, from Cyprus, and then
Yeah.
I cycled all the way back to UBC
Wow.
and that was those trails were far more technical than the race was.
Yeah,
But
for sure. Yeah.
just want to do
Yeah.
it.
That's so cool. Yeah, so I guess before we dive in here, I just
Mhm.
wanted to note that this conversation is grounded in your published research, and my questions are only intended to explore how your work helps us better understand the role of leadership in promoting ethical behavior within organizations.
Mhm.
So, to start off here, I have some questions for you. So, in your research on moral identity, you talk about how the way people see themselves is a huge driver of their behavior. So, for those of us who aren't experts, could you describe that framework and why it's so important for understanding ethical
Yeah.
leadership?
Yeah, and I would say that my colleague here at UBC, Carl Aquino, is far more expert on moral identity than I
Yeah,
am. But
yeah,
so moral identity refers to how do you think of yourself? So we think of ourselves as various aspects of who we are, right? So I think of myself as a researcher. I think of myself as a teacher. I think of myself as a mountain biker. I think of
yeah,
myself as a father. So I have these different, identities within myself. So then the question of moral identity is of those various aspects of who you are, which one is most salient or most important to you? So if I had to say like between father, mountain biker, researcher, or teacher, which one's most important, then I would say, oh, my role of as father is most salient in my thinking and guiding my actions and who I am. Okay. So
right,
that's the general idea of different parts of the self. So moral
right,
identity is to what degree is being a moral person forefront in your set of identities that you have about yourself. So,
right,
like, is it really important to you to be a moral person? Or is it more important that you earn as much status and money as possible?
right.
Because, do you see yourself as being a rich person more than you see yourself as being a moral person? Because the degree to which one of those identities is more or less salient is going to influence how you act in different situations.
Right, right, exactly. Okay, awesome. Um, and then here, another question here. So most people think ethics is really just about being a good person, but what I've read in your work, it shows that it's obviously a lot more complex than that. And so does it change the vibe for a team if a leader focuses on rewards rather than just waiting to punish people? And does that shift whether the team actually feels safe enough to do the right thing?
That's a good question about how power framing might influence how safe they feel to do the right thing. So, let me introduce a little bit what I mean by power framing.
Right.
In that paper, when I talk about power framing, what I explain is that when a organizational leader has control over some resource that people want, that leader can choose to frame that power in terms of how they talk about it. They could talk about it in ways that emphasize their ability to punish or their ability to reward. So, for example, if I had power over your salary, like whether or not you get a salary increase year to year, I could say like, hey, Braden, if you do this thing, I'm going to be able to give you a nice, bonus at the end of the year, right? So
Right.
focus on the reward. Or I could say, hey, Braden, if you don't do this thing, I'm going to make sure you don't get any bonus at the end of the year. Right. So it's the same control, but do I frame it as, hey, I have the ability to reward you, or I have the ability to punish you?
Right.
And what we found is that when leaders frame their power as the ability to reward, they're seen as being more benevolent. more interested in the welfare and the well-being of the people that they're trying to lead.
Right.
And then when a person believes that their leader has more benevolence, they feel more empowered to try new things, to take some risks, to explore new options, to consider new ideas. Now, the degree to which that freedom to explore results in ethical behavior or not, well, that's going to probably depend upon the moral identity of the person,
Right.
and degree to which they're interested in breaking rules so that they can get ahead and subvert other people and be promoted and earn more money, or whether they are interested in taking risks that are going to improve the quality of the work because they're interested in improving performance. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, and obviously if the leader or boss or whatever is saying, "Hey, like you're not going to get your bonus if you don't do this," then they're saying, "Oh, if you do this, you're going to get a reward." Then the person's going to have more of an incentive to go and do the right thing rather than cut corners and, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I would say it does. There's a couple of other factors that play into that issue, because we have a robust amount of research that indicates that when leaders um, uh, provide challenging goals that are difficult to obtain, and then they put a lot of pressure to obtain those goals. So if I gave you a difficult goal and I told you I'm going to give you a reward for accomplishing that goal, we have research indicates that you're likely to act unethically in order to
Mhm.
accomplish that goal.
Right.
And there's lots of examples in the workplace where this occurs. So not only is it supported in the research, but also supported anecdotally in the news. So yeah, if you combine, your reward power framing with a lot of pressure to meet challenging goals, what you might accidentally be doing is incentivizing people to take shortcuts and to
Right.
break the rules because they're highly interested in getting that reward at any cost.
That's right. Yeah, that no, no, that totally makes sense for sure. Okay. So, yeah, no, and I actually came across your Harvard Business Review article on how humor affects status. And I thought it was a really interesting look at how we signal who we are. So, beyond just making jokes, what are some other small things leaders can do, maybe without even thinking about it, that really set the tone for the rest of the team?
Well, this is where I've got quite a bit of interest, okay? And I've got this paper on humor, and happy to go into the details of what we found in that paper. And then other ways that leaders signal what they're thinking and feeling is, you may find situations where what you want to signal as a leader is anger.
Right.
And signaling anger could mean, hey, this is a really, really important issue, or like this situation has a lot of injustice in it, and we need to take this seriously. And so you may find situations where signaling anger is important. And then I've got a whole bunch of research on signaling curiosity.
Right.
And I think many leaders feel a pressure to provide answers. And we talk about how good leaders are very visionary, that they have a vision of how things can be, and they kind of get people on board with that vision. And that might put pressure on people to think, was if I'm in the leadership role, I have to know the answers and have a clarity of where we're going. But when leaders sort of let go of that pressure and are willing to admit that they don't know and ask questions to understand better and kind of generate this culture of it's okay to signal that you don't know and ask genuine questions to learn more. When they do that, then similar to my power framing work, people feel more interested and motivated to search for new solutions and new possibilities. They're more interested, and they feel more intellectually stimulated and more interested in exploring new ideas.
Right. Right. No, yeah, I totally agree with that. Okay. So when things get like competitive at work, or there's like a competitive aspect, the pressure to win can be huge. Like for example, like with the reward that you mentioned, in your research on these types of climates, have you found any systems or rewards that actually keep people honest and encouraging them to do things the right way rather than just cutting corners and trying to get an easier way around it?
Mm, mm. Um, Consistently, and I'm speaking more broadly about research that I've like incorporated into my teaching and study than any particular study that I've done myself. But
Sure.
more broadly, um, there's very little research that supports the idea that reward structures help people act more ethically. There's
Mm.
far more research indicating that especially with difficult goals and rewards, that it incentivizes unethical behavior. But what can be really helpful with encouraging ethical behavior and encouraging people to do the right thing is, what do leaders do when mistakes are made? Because if when mistakes are made, leaders come down harshly and they punish severely, or that they put a lot of pressure on perfect performance, then people will tend to hide mistakes and take shortcuts and do things in ways that are not proper. But if you as a leader talk about mistakes as an opportunity to learn, if you frame it in the terms of, well, what did we learn about this? Why did things go poorly, and how can we improve ourselves and do better going forward? That's sort of like acceptance of the fact that mistakes occur and a desire to take those mistakes and learn from them. That makes a big difference in people's willingness to do what's right, to talk about things in a more real and candid manner. And then we also found that when leaders are willing to reflect on mistakes and identify what they've learned from them, then they are more humble in their leadership activities. And that leader humility is something that's quite contagious within teams. When leaders act with humility, then more followers act with humility.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, no, I find that a similar experience for me. Like at my workplace, I work at Earl's, for example, and we have a competition where we're supposed to get as much feedback as possible on our dishes and stuff like that. And um, they they're very helpful, and they allow us to, I mean, they always give us sorry, questions and all that to help us get through it. But um, there's been times where it's too competitive, and then I end up wanting to, how am I going to get there without without doing it the proper way, right? Like how can I cut my corners around and maybe just throw a couple extra in there or whatever, right? So I totally agree.
Yeah. So another way to think about this is, if you turn it into a game like that, then people will game the system.
Hmm.
And I'm a strong proponent of the idea that it isn't possible to create a reward structure that entirely encapsulates all the ways that a person could circumvent the rules. Like it's just too difficult to create that. And so if you put together kind of like stipulations of do this and get a reward, people will game the system and they'll find ways to juke the numbers, and it's going to
Yeah.
be not quite what I have plenty of personal stories in my work experience as well, where high pressure was put onto providing good reports, and good reports were provided, but I'm not saying that the actual reports reflected what actually occurred.
Right, right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So like you mentioned before, you are the director at the Montalbano Centre. And what are some of the big ethical situations Canadian leaders are dealing with right now? So how do they actually balance staying profitable while taking care of their people and the environment?
There's a couple of things that I've noticed. First of all, I'll say I hear a lot as I work in the center with various executives. A lot of people are wrestling with the question of AI.
Right.
What they're wrestling with is, how do I incorporate AI in a way that doesn't harm the careers, livelihood, work occupations of people within my organization. So I hear a lot of people questioning and thinking about that.
Right.
And one thing I've noticed here in the Vancouver, BC area, especially compared to other places I've been, there are a lot of organizations that I notice this a lot in the mountain biking industry actually,
Yeah.
that they have a stated um, mission in their organization that is rejecting growth, that they specifically state our goal is not to grow market share and year over year increase, production. That their whole objective is to be providing quality products and
Hmm.
and staying within a sustainable model in terms of employees and performance year over year. And yeah, two companies I know like that have that kind of perspective. I love buying their products because I believe in their core ideology of their organization. So that's one way that I've seen some companies deal with this issue of how do I take care of my people and deal with profitability is they explicitly state that increasing, growth is not our objective.
Right. Right. Okay. Um, so yeah, we've been talking about those silent ethical issues where people don't just speak up. In your research, why are these sins of omission so much harder to handle than someone just breaking a rule? Is it because they're harder to see, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, you're referring to my paper about counterproductive work behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the things that we accomplished with that paper is distinguishing between actively harming the organization and passively harming the organization. And yeah, I, I don't have research that supports this claim I'm about to make, but I think it's a pretty logical claim, which is that passive harm to the organization is something that is less detectable, that
Mm.
only the person can report whether or not they failed to do something. The way that we measured passive harm to the organization was things like in terms of interpersonal harm, it would be not responding to somebody's request for help or
Right.
not stepping up and helping somebody when you could have. And there's different ways you could hide whether or not you did that. And it's the same thing with what we found for harming the organization, which would be not putting in an honest day's work,
Right.
taking a longer break than you should have, not working a full day. And again, there are ways that people can hide those things. And so
Okay.
I would say that yeah, passively harming the organization, those are less detectable things. And I know that nowadays we have all kinds of devices that are tracking keystrokes and mouse movements and
Yeah.
time at the computer and whatnot.
Right.
But even those, there's ways around those things too. It's
Right.
that's just a game of you know game of attrition of comparing your technology versus mine as we continue to try to monitor or not. But I think
Right.
ultimately the sort of passively harming organization is not something that people can witness.
Right. Right. So that's kind of what you mean by the sins of omission is
Yeah, yeah.
okay. So how much can one leader actually change on their own? So like if a company has already a pretty rough culture, or if the company culture is already pretty rough, can one person really turn things around by acting the right way, or are they kind of just stuck with the system that they're in?
Yeah, I had debates with my friends about this back when I was
Yeah,
in my previous careers,
yeah,
because my friends and I, we were kind of frustrated with some of the things we were seeing in the senior leadership of the organization. And we kind of asked ourselves, like, how might we change that? And here's the challenge in changing it. Um, in order to, in general, in order to be promoted into higher positions within an organization, you have to embody the characteristics of the organization and those higher employees within it.
right.
So here I am, a lower level employee, and I'm complaining about the behaviors of senior executives.
Mhm.
But the people that will be selected as senior executives are the ones that are behaving in more similar ways than them.
Right,
So
right,
so we thought, well, what if you pretended to be like them in order to get into the position, and then you exerted your influence over the way you think things ought to be. But the problem with that is that, when you start acting in a certain way over a number of years, that changes who you are. And
right,
I don't think it's either healthy nor productive to pretend to be one thing when you believe something else. You're unlikely to be successful. It's going to create a lot of personal tension and stress.
yeah,
So I don't think you're going to end up in that position where you can influence.
right,
So that's kind of the cynical view that, like, one person probably isn't able to change the organization
right.
because those norms are so embedded within it. But can an outsider be brought in and exert a change? I have seen groups, smaller groups and smaller subdivisions, that the influence of the charismatic new
Mhm.
leader is a big deal. They can exert a major influence on how people think and feel and act in the workplace. So I guess you could say then I don't have a lot of belief in the sort of like bottom up person being able to
Yeah,
change, but
yeah,
bringing in an outside change agent, I guess I do have a belief that can make a difference.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I totally agree. I mean, if someone were to kind of like put on a persona that they don't really have, I feel like if they did that long enough, eventually they might actually gain those traits. And,
Yeah.
it
Either they
probably will
become
end up,
that thing,
yeah,
or they never get promoted because they're not genuine.
right, right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So, um, in your research, how do you actually define responsibility? Is it just about like checking the boxes on rules, or is it more of like a stewardship mindset where people are looking out for the long-term health of the company?
Yeah, it's we take a stewardship perspective, and in the Montalbano Center for Responsible Leadership Development, we have a definition of responsible leadership, which is
Yeah.
stewardship based, and what we focus on is that. So, what do leaders do? Leaders influence change. Primarily, that's what they do. That's the main job of what leaders do. And all my research and all my teaching on leadership is about how do you influence change. And so
Mhm.
then what does a responsible leadership do? What does a responsible leader do? A responsible leader influences change while taking into consideration the legitimate needs of stakeholders. I should say incorporating the needs of legitimate stakeholders.
Mhm.
Now, we don't define who is or is not a legitimate stakeholder. That
Right.
really is up to the leader to figure out. I don't
Mhm.
think that there's a universal definition of that. And so, from context to context and situation to situation, you're going to have different people claiming legitimacy in terms of being a stakeholder in your enterprise, and therefore you should meet their needs. And what a responsible leader has to do is they have to take in those various claims of stakeholders and figure out what is legitimate and what makes sense in terms of acting ethically. So as I understand it, responsible leadership requires a person to have a clarity of what their ethical moral compass is, because they got to rely upon that to deal with this challenge of identifying legitimate stakeholder claims.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you. Um, so a question. So for students like me, at CapU or wherever you're graduating from, who are about to start their careers, what is one curious habit or insight from your research that you hope we take into our professional roles?
Boy, that's a good question. There's a couple
No.
thoughts come to mind. One thought
Yeah.
that comes to mind is, like, right now, you are deeply engaged in the learning process.
Right.
And you're probably exhausted by it because you've been doing it for years, and you're so looking forward to that ending, and then
The
you're
end.
in a yeah, you're in a more of a contributing role. But let me suggest to you, um, it won't take long after you've transitioned out of being a student where you're going to feel this unmet need for continued learning.
Right.
And so when that occurs, I just encourage people to lean into that and find ways to continue to learn. And really, that should involve reading books and taking classes. And to be clear on this, the research is pretty obvious that listening is not the same learning process as reading.
Right.
And the research on learning styles does not support the idea that different people have different modalities of a more effective learning. And so you got to lean into the discomfort of learning something new. And so I really encourage people to be reading books and expanding their knowledge and leaning into the discomfort of something new. And then the other thought that came to mind is, um, do things and take risks. Like, you don't
Right.
have to have it all perfectly figured out at first. I had no idea where I would end up, or even when I started my engineering degree, that I would be in the military, let alone eventually one day, PhD and professor. And so, but each step of the way, I jumped in with both feet and was fully engaged in that thing. And then things unfolded for me step by step. So take risks, and when you make a choice and go a direction, go all in. And then as you're moving along, be willing to reevaluate and take a hard change in a different direction, and then go all in on that one. And when you do that, it's just more fun and exciting, and
Yeah.
you find yourself in a spot that you hadn't expected, but it's far better than you hoped it could be.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, your journey is definitely an inspiration for that. I mean, you've definitely taken risks and gone from I mean, you've done everything, so it's incredible. Yeah. So, yeah, no, I appreciate your answer there.
Sure.
So last one for me. What do you think is the next big thing for leadership that we weren't aren't really asking about, that people aren't really like focused on right now? Do you think AI is going to be like the next big thing? It's going to totally reshape how we trust, don't trust, or uh, our leaders in the future, or what do you think there?
So in my studies of the field of research and then talking with leaders, I think the bigger challenge with AI and leadership is similar to the challenge that we're facing here in academia with AI, which is,
Yeah.
how do we incorporate AI in a way that advances our cognitive skills and doesn't undermine our cognitive skills?
Right.
And so leaders need to figure that out, that challenge. And it probably starts with the self, right? How do I use AI to improve my cognitive functioning and not accidentally undermine it? And then helping other people experience the same. The other thing that I see increasingly getting attention is the need for leaders to understand and appreciate a wider variety of emotions. So mental health is an increasing topic of understanding. Like we have a better ability to understand different mental health illnesses that are out there, a better
Mhm.
acceptance of people struggling with mental health, and a better understanding of tools that can help with that. Leaders need to be educated on that stuff. They
Yeah.
need to be able to understand their emotions better. They need to be able to understand the tools to be emotionally healthy. They need to understand how to help other people with the emotions that they're experiencing and accessing the tools that they need to be emotionally healthy. Increasingly, I'm seeing this as being a trend and a need. So those are two things that come to mind.
Yeah. Okay. No, I totally agree. I mean, it's a huge thing. I mean, AI, people are relying on it from everything from picking what their next meal is going to be to, it's crazy. So,
I do it for
um,
all kinds of things, and
I
I'm
know I do
constantly
too, but
figuring out how to use it better. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
mean, there's always lots of help with that. I mean, it works really well.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So. I wanted to thank you again, Dr. Evans, for the conversation. It was super awesome, and your insights have helped me wrap my head around leadership and how it actually drives ethical behavior and decision making in a real company. And yeah, this chat has been a huge part of my learning for this ethics course, and especially getting to see how these big ideas play out in the Canadian business world. And I appreciate you taking the time today, and